Assalamu alaikum to all my brothers and sisters today. Sheikh Abdul Rahman Alexander and the leadership of this great mosque, the board, the committee, I am deeply grateful for this moment to be with you. I am aware of the extraordinary privilege that you have afforded me to speak with you in this setting, at the Jummah setting. And I feel the weight of that privilege, so thank you. I have heard that we are starting a bit earlier because the students have to go and write exams today. And so we wish God's blessings upon them. But I must remind them what my mother always told me. My mother said, please do not pray only, study. Because God will not come down from heaven and take the pen in God's hand and write your exams for you. So I hope that you have done both. And if you have done both, go into that exam room with confidence, knowing that you will do well. But I also think, my brothers and sisters, of what I heard this week of a 19-year-old Palestinian girl in Gaza, apparently an extraordinarily brilliant young woman, 99.6% they tell us was her average. She graduated this July, and was destined for great things. In the beginning of this week, she was killed, murdered. A brilliant young mind, not just robbed from her presence in Gaza or in Palestine, but for the whole world. And so when I hear a thing like that, I think how grateful we must be that we have children who can still go and write exams and have a future ahead of them. But today, let me speak to you about what I have been asked to contemplate on. How long, the question. And I want to make it how long for the children. We are entering in the Christian tradition the season of what we call Advent. That is the Sundays towards the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. If you read the Gospels, you find that there are two sides to the Christmas story. In the Gospel of Matthew and in the Gospel of Luke. In Luke, the story is filled with joy. Mary, the mother of Jesus, goes to Elizabeth, her aunt, and when she arrives there, Elizabeth is pregnant, and the baby in Elizabeth's womb jumps for joy. Mary herself sings a song, a wonderful song that I regard as one of the most revolutionary songs in our scriptures. The angels gather in the sky at night, and they burst into songs of glory to God. The shepherds hear this, they rush to Bethlehem, and they come back from Bethlehem with great joy to tell everybody what they have seen in that crib, in that inn. But not so in the Gospel of Matthew. There is hardly any joy. There we find the dark side of Christmas. And it begins with the announcement that the king is Herod, a sellout who worked with the Romans in the oppression of his own people. And when Herod hears the news that there is a new king that was born, he flew into a rage, and he decided in the end to kill all the children. And so in the book of Matthew, the life of Jesus begins with the murder of the children. It's always the children. Even then, as it is now. But we should keep two things in mind when we talk about this, brothers and sisters. The one thing is that in the first century, Palestine was occupied country. Occupied by a brutal Roman regime, an empire Just as in the 21st century, Palestine is an occupied country, occupied by a brutal Israeli regime under the aegis of the American empire. The brutalization is the same. The occupation is the same. The oppression of the people is the same. The pain of the people is the same. The suffering of the people is the same. And that's where Jesus was born, amidst an occupied people. The second thing we must remember is that Jesus was a Palestinian child. And he lived in occupied Galilee. He worked in occupied Galilee. That's where he stood up to fight for the freedom of his people in his day. And he was crucified by the Romans as a criminal because he stood up against the powers that be and told them the truth about his people. It's always about the children. So how long for the children? You all watch the news. We all see how the numbers continue to climb. When I watched last, over 10,000 Palestinians dead, over 4,230 children dead. 1,350 children, they say, still under the rubble. Those not killed by the bombs will be killed by the guns. Those not killed by the guns will be killed by lack of medicine, lack of food, and lack of water, deliberately deprived of those essentials. So they will kill the babies in their incubators on the streets and in the ambulances that take the sick and the wounded to those hospitals, in the doorways of those hospitals. How long for those children? Save the Children said this week that there have been more children killed in 4 weeks in this war by Israel than in all the wars in all the world since 2019. 4 weeks, more children than in 4 years. So what about the children? The children who have survived have seen indescribable tragedies and horrors. They will be traumatized for life. Children who have lost every single family member. And while all of this is happening, the world debates whether this is a genocide or not. The world debates whether this is a war of extermination or not. The world talks about theories and scientific understandings and understanding of international law. In the meantime, the children are dying. While this happens, we as a country have not yet made up our mind whether we should shut the Israeli embassy, whether we should act immediately. We will now make a proposal that they be taken, Netanyahu and his crowd, to the International Court of Justice. But that is taking our responsibility and putting it in the hands of others. And we know the bias with which those organizations work. And so we must take our responsibility ourselves, and we must do what we can, because we hear differently. We hear the children of Gaza differently than America does. Or at least the government of America, because the people of America, thank God, are at last beginning to realize what their country is doing in their name. And so that is something that we must support and that we must be grateful for. But we must not dilly-dally. There are still political parties in this country who are not ashamed to say, we stand with Israel despite all of these wars, despite the ongoing Nakba, despite the wars of genocide, despite the fact that they know that they want to make sure that their is no Palestinian left on any Palestinian land. And yet they come and they knock at your door to vote for them, their blood-dripping hands knocking on your door. Their blood-dripping conscience making their mouth speak niceties to you while they are supporting and cheering on a genocide on our own people, because those are our brothers and sisters. They are our children of God. So we have to remember that when we talk about these things, my brothers and my sisters, we are talking about children who are dying on the ground, on the rubble under which more children may still be alive, but whose voices are getting fainter by the minute. How long will that last? How long will it take for us to come to the realization that our stand on Palestine, what we do for Palestine, is the criterion, is the litmus test for the integrity of our politics, but also the litmus test for the authenticity of our faith. If God would judge us, I feel today, upon how faithful have you been, God's question will be for you and for me, where did you stand in the moment of Palestine's greatest grief and greatest need? That will be the test. Have you done justice? Have you sought peace? Have your heart been open? Have you cried out? And have you done whatever you could? That is the test for our faith. So we hear this. The mothers are crying, the fathers are crying. Those on the road to nowhere are crying, how long, how long? Those who have heard evacuate and run from the north to the south and then been bombed on the way to what was called safety, their cry, their cry, their cry is what we are hearing today. I saw 2 days ago that the digital spokesperson of Prime Minister Netanyahu had posted a picture. And on that, underneath that picture, is a picture of a row of dead Palestinian children. The words he posted underneath that picture was the following: we have done the world a service, destroying these little ticking time bombs who would have grown up to be a threat to the whole world. Think about that for one moment, children of God. So, 10 years old, it's good you are dead, you threat to the world. 5 years old, it's good you are dead, you threat to the world. 2 years old, it's good you are dead, you threat to the world. You in your mother's womb and she is killed, it's good you are dead. You are a threat to the world. That is what we hear alongside of the cry, how long, how long, how long? King Herod is dead though, but Netanyahu is still alive, and so the cry remains, how long? Not just for him, for his people, because he still does not understand that you cannot build your future on the death of children, on the blood of another. But amidst the darkness of the Matthew Christmas story, there is one ray of light we read. It tells us that the parents of Jesus, when they heard of the decree of King Herod, took their child and fled with him to Egypt. So Africa opens its arms to offer refuge to this child. We are the children of Africa. And shall we today open our arms, our hearts, our lives, our sacrifices to be a refuge for the children of Gaza, Well, Africa come alive as it came alive 2,000 years ago to open our refuge to these children. And how do we do that? What is this refuge? By raising our voices wherever we can. By standing up for justice for Palestine wherever we can. By calling for peace immediately and an end to that war everywhere we can. By linking hands, by linking arms, walking together, marching together, let the world see what it is that we mean. That is refuge that we are offering. What will that refuge be? By proclaiming the truth to everyone in power and those outside of power. That the cry, how long, will no longer be just how long. But that cry, one day, we must not stop, we must not stop. We must not stop until the cry, how long, will be replaced by another cry, not as a future vision that Palestine shall be free, but as a present reality. That cry I'm talking about, from the river to the sea, Palestine is free. And it will happen, it will happen, it will happen if all God's children get together. It will happen if all God's children stand up now. It will happen if all God's children raise our voices together. It will happen because Palestine deserves it. The children deserve it. Replace that cry. Replace that cry. No longer how long, but Palestine is free. And not just in bits and pieces like little Bantustans, but from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. God bless you all.